September 22, 1943, 0430 hours. Deep beneath the glassy surface of Kåfjord, Norway, where the midnight sun has long faded into autumn's chill grip, the water presses in like a vice, cold enough to numb your bones through layers of wool and steel. Inside the cramped hull of X6, a midget submarine no bigger than a London bus, Lieutenant Donald Cameron wipes sweat from his brow despite the freezing abyss outside. The air is thick, stale with the tang of battery acid and unwashed men, every breath a calculated ration. You can almost feel the weight of the fjord above, hear the faint creak of the pressure hull protesting against the depths. Cameron's eyes, sharp and unyielding, flick to the periscope as his hand steadies the wheel. "Steady as she goes," he whispers to Sub-Lieutenant John Lorimer, his voice barely cutting through the hum of the electric motors. The elite crew, Cameron, Lorimer, Sub-Lieutenant Richard Kendall, and engine room artificer Edmund Goddard, huddle in silence, hearts hammering like depth charges in the distance. This isn't just a mission, it's a suicide run into the lion's den, where Hitler's floating fortress, the battleship Tirpitz, lurks like a steel behemoth, her 15-inch guns silent but ever watchful. The journey to this forsaken corner of the Arctic had been a gauntlet of its own, a tale of grit and loss that tested the Royal Navy's resolve to its core. It all began 11 days earlier, on September 11th, from the misty shores of Loch Cairnbawn in Scotland's rugged highlands. 6 X-craft midget submarines, X5, X6, X7, X8, X9, and X10 slipped into the North Sea, each towed by a larger S or T-class submarine, like invisible shadows trailing their mothers. These were no ordinary subs. At just 51 feet long and displacing a mere 30 tons submerged, they were engineering marvels born of desperation. Powered by a Gardner diesel for surface running and electric batteries below, they carried 2 massive side cargo charges, each packing 2 tons of amytal explosive, timed to detonate after placement. No torpedoes, no guns, just stealth, cunning, and the raw nerve of their 4-man crews. The passage crews handled the grueling tow across 1,000 miles of storm-tossed Atlantic, battling seas that could swallow a man whole. Imagine it, strapped inside a tin can, swaying violently at the end of a 150-fathom manila rope, the constant groan of the tow line straining against waves that crashed like artillery fire. For Cameron's X6, towed by HMS Truculent under Lieutenant Commander Robert Alexander, the days blurred into a haze of nausea and vigilance. Sub-Lieutenant E.V. Page and his team had nursed her through the worst, handing over to the operational crew, Cameron's hand-picked warriors, off the Solroy Sound on September 20th. But not all made it this far. X9, under her passage crew of Lieutenant Edward Kieran, able seaman Harry Hart, and stoker George Hollett, vanished on September 16th when her tow parted in a gale, plunging bow first into the depths. No survivors, just a ghostly silence on the hydrophones. X8 fared little better. Leaks in her side charges forced Lieutenant Jack Smart's team to jettison them, only for the explosives to detonate nearby, crippling the craft. Scuttled on September 18th, her crew rescued, but the mission's odds lengthening like the Arctic shadows. Now, as X6 glides through the inky blackness, Cameron's mind races. The intelligence had been painstakingly gathered. Norwegian resistance fighters like the Johansen brothers risking execution to map the fjord's defenses, while a daring Soviet reconnaissance flight by Captain Leonid Elkin on September 12 delivered crystal-clear photos of Tirpitz's lair. Anchored in Kåfjord, a narrow arm of Altenfjord, the 42,900-ton monster was shielded by anti-torpedo nets, smoke generators, and a flotilla of destroyers. Her 8 38-centimeter SKC-34 guns could pulverize a convoy from 20 miles away, a constant threat to Allied Arctic supply lines to Russia. Churchill himself had demanded her destruction, dubbing Tirpitz the Beast. But how? Conventional attacks had failed. RAF bombers bounced off her armor. Fleet air arm strikes turned back by flak. Enter Operation Source, an audacious plan from Commander Henty Cromwell Varley, greenlit by Admiral Sir Max Horton. Midget subs to slip under the nets, plant charges beneath her keel, and vanish or die trying. The fjord's entrance looms in the dim hydroplane lights. X6's sister craft are out there too. X7 under Lieutenant Basil Godfrey Place. X5 commanded by Lieutenant Henty Creer. X10 with Lieutenant Ken Hudspeth aiming for Scharnhorst. But X10's plagued by compass failures, her attack already faltering. X6 eases the throttle, the sub's wet induction periscope barely breaking surface for a glimpse. There, silhouetted against the jagged peaks, Tirpitz's massive superstructure, 823 feet of Nazi engineering prowess, her decks alive with watchmen. The air raid sirens haven't wiled yet, the Germans suspect nothing. But the nets await, steel webs laced with mines and hydrophones. One wrong move and it's over. Lorimer checks the diving planes. Goddard nurses the batteries, down to 60%, enough for the dash but precious little margin. Kendall plots the course on a sodden chart, his pencil scratching like a fuse burning short. As X6 noses toward the outer boom, a faint ping echoes through the hull. A German patrol boat's Azdik? The crew freezes, breaths held. Cameron's jaw tightens. They've come too far to turn back now. But what lies beyond those nets? A vulnerability so profound it defies belief, or a trap that will claim them all. The submarine inches forward, the tension coiling like a spring about to snap. The ping fades into nothing, just a ghost echo, perhaps a fishing boat's propeller in the distance. Cameron exhales slowly, the tension uncoiling only a fraction. "Take her down to 30 feet, he orders, voice low and steady. X6 dips, the diving planes biting into the frigid water as she glides beneath the outer anti-submarine boom, a floating barrier of steel cables and mines meant to snare anything larger than a seal. But these midget subs were built for exactly this, small enough to slip through gaps designed for full-sized hunters. Now the real gauntlet begins. Ahead lies the double ring of anti-torpedo nets encircling Tirpitz herself, heavy steel mesh draped from surface buoys to the muddy fjord bed 40 meters below, studded with listening posts and patrolled by armed trawlers. The Germans had learned bitter lessons from earlier attacks. After the Chariot human torpedo raid on the ship in October 1942 failed disastrously, they'd woven their defenses tighter than ever. You can picture the watch officers on Tirpitz's bridge, sipping ersatz coffee under the pale northern light, confident that nothing could reach their unsinkable prize. Inside X6, the air grows heavier, warmer from the men's bodies and the straining batteries. Goddard wipes condensation from the gauges, battery charge holding at 52%, oxygen reserves still green. Kendall peers through the tiny attack periscope, its lens barely larger than a coin. Nets in sight, sir. 2 layers, 20 yards apart. Gap looks possible. Cameron nods, his Scottish calm masking the storm inside. These men had trained for months in the freezing lochs of western Scotland, practicing net cutting with divers in blackout conditions, memorizing every contour of Kåfjord from grainy reconnaissance photos. But training and reality are worlds apart. At 05:47 hours, X6 makes her move. Cameron brings her up to periscope depth for one final look. There she is, Tirpitz, vast and gray, her swastika flags limp in the still morning air, her 4 twin turrets trained fore and aft like sleeping giants. Destroyers Z-29 and Z-33 lie at anchor nearby, their crews stirring for morning watch change. A faint haze of smoke curls from the battleship's funnels. She's raising steam, perhaps preparing to move. Time is bleeding away. Down periscope, dive to 45 feet, we'll go under. The order is crisp. The little sub tilts forward, electric motors humming as she descends toward the seabed. The plan is simple in theory. Pass beneath the nets, surface inside the enclosure, drop the 2 2-ton charges directly under Tirpitz's keel, where her armor is thinnest, and escape before the timers tick down. Simple, except nothing about this fjord is forgiving. Then, disaster strikes X7. Out there in the darkness, Basil Place's boat tangles fatally in the outer nets. Her diving planes snag on a steel cable, dragging her upward until she breaches surface with a crash that echoes across the water like a gunshot. Alarms shriek aboard the German patrol vessels. Searchlights snap on, slicing white beams through the gloom. Machine guns chatter as tracers arc toward the exposed conning tower. Place fights to free his craft, flooding tanks, blowing ballast, but the nets hold fast. You can almost hear the shouted orders in German, the frantic klaxons rousing Tirpitz's 2,000-man crew to action stations. Inside X6, the distant commotion reaches them as muffled thuds and the sudden roar of engines overhead. Cameron's head snaps up. That's Place. They've got him. The crew exchange glances. No words needed. The element of surprise is shattering like glass. German destroyers rev up, dropping depth charges in patterns designed to flush out intruders. The water transmits the explosions as bone-rattling shocks, pressure waves slamming X6's hull. Lights flicker. A gauge needle jumps wildly. Yet, Cameron doesn't hesitate. Hold course. They're looking for something big. We're ghosts. He pushes the sub deeper, scraping along the silty bottom until the keel grinds softly against rock. Ahead, the shadow of the first net looms on the sonar repeater, a vertical wall of metal. Lorimer and Kendall prepare the side cargo release mechanisms, fingers trembling not from cold, but from the knowledge that if they surface too soon, the battleship's secondary batteries will turn them to scrap. And then, impossibly, a gap appears. Not wide, just a few feet where the net has sagged against the uneven seabed, perhaps torn by winter ice or neglected maintenance. Cameron threads the needle with surgeon's precision, the sub's rounded bow nosing through, hull plates groaning as cables scrape along the casing. One snag, one spark, and it's over. But they clear it. The second net follows moments later, easier now that the Germans are distracted by X7's desperate struggle. At 07:12 hours, X6 surfaces inside the inner enclosure, less than 200 yards from Tirpitz's massive gray flank. Dawnlight glints off her armored belt. Sailors on deck stare down in stunned disbelief at the tiny intruder that has materialized in their midst like a nightmare made real. Alarms wail anew. Rifle shots crack overhead. Cameron doesn't flinch. The moment of greatest vulnerability has arrived, but so has the chance no one truly believed possible. Rifle bullets slap the water around X6's tiny conning tower like angry hornets. German sailors line Tirpitz's railings, shouting in disbelief as they fumble for weapons. A klaxon howls across the fjord, deep and guttural, the battleship coming alive with frantic movement. Searchlights sweep the surface, pinning the Midget sub in harsh white glare. But Cameron doesn't dive. Not yet. "Port 10, steady on the keel line," he says, voice unnaturally calm. You can almost feel the adrenaline surging through the crew. Lorimer at the hydroplanes, Kendall timing the charge releases, Goddard throttling the electric motor to keep way on her in the slight current. They've rehearsed this 100 times in Scottish locks, but never with a 42,000-ton monster towering above them, never with machine gun fire stitching the waves. X6 creeps forward at dead slow, barely 3 knots, her diesel silenced hours ago. The battleship's massive hull looms like a cliff face, gray steel plates riveted in perfect rows, barnacles clinging below the waterline, the faint smell of fuel oil drifting down even here. Cameron raises the attack periscope one last time. Through the crosshairs, he sees Tirpitz's vitals, the armored belt ending just above the water, the vulnerable bilge keel running her entire length. That's the target. Drop the charges directly beneath B and C turrets, amidships, where the explosions will lift and break her spine. Range 70 yards, depth under keel estimated 40 feet. Kendall's voice is steady, but his knuckles are white on the stopwatch. They have minutes, maybe less, before the destroyers close in or Tirpitz slips her moorings. Meanwhile, 30 yards astern, X7 is fighting for her life. Basil Place has cut free from the outer nets, only to tangle again in the inner ring. His diver, Sub-Lieutenant Malcolm Causer, has gone overboard in a Sladen suit to hack at the cables with shears, but the cold and current are merciless. Place surfaces deliberately, drawing fire, buying precious seconds for the others. German boats swarm him, boarding parties with grenades ready. Place and his crew will be taken prisoner, but not before they complete their own deadly drop. Back on X6, Cameron makes the call. Release starboard charge. A dull thud reverberates through the hull as the 2-ton Amitol bomb detaches and sinks on its delay line, settling gently onto the muddy bottom directly beneath Tirpitz's starboard bilge keel. 30 seconds later, release port charge. The second bomb drops clean. Both are set to detonate in 1 hour. Enough time, in theory, to escape. The moment the charges are away, Cameron orders an immediate dive. X6 noses down hard, scraping along the seabed as depth charges begin to rain from the closing destroyers. The first explosions are distant, but each one closer than the last. The pressure hull groans, rivets weep, lights shatter and sparks. Goddard battles flooding in the motor room as a seam splits. You can taste the fear now, sharp, metallic, mixed with the acrid bite of chlorine gas from cracked batteries. But the charges are placed perfectly. Cameron allows himself one glance back through the periscope as they pull away. Tirpitz, still at anchor, oblivious to the doom sleeping beneath her. Sailors on deck are cheering the capture of what they think is the only intruder, X7's crew being hauled aboard as prisoners. They have no idea 2 more bombs lie ticking on the fjord floor. X6 limps toward the nets for escape, trailing bubbles and oil. The batteries are nearly spent, the air is foul. And then the final twist. In the confusion, X5, Henty Creer's boat, makes her own silent approach from another vector. Though never seen again, intelligence later confirms she too reached the target area and dropped at least 1 charge before vanishing forever. As Cameron fights to clear the nets outward, the clock ticks mercilessly toward 0800 hours. The charges are armed. There is no recall, no abort. In less than 60 minutes, the Arctic silence will be shattered by the largest non-nuclear explosions the war has yet seen, and the men who placed them are still trapped inside the fjord, racing against time, tide, and an enemy now fully awake.
07:30 a.m. The fjord is a cauldron of chaos. German patrol boats roar in circles, dropping pattern after pattern of depth charges that bloom into towering white geysers. Each detonation slams X6 like a giant's fist, hurling the crew against bulkheads, shattering what few lights remain. Blood trickles from Goddard's forehead where he cracked it on a valve wheel, but he stays at his post, hands flying over the bilge pumps as water rises ankle-deep in the motor room. Cameron fights the planes, trying to keep her on the bottom without burying the bow in mud. "Batteries at 12%, sir," Kendall reports, voice hoarse. "We'll lose propulsion in minutes." Escape speed is impossible now. The only hope is to crawl along the seabed, hugging the shadows, and pray the Germans think all intruders are accounted for. Up on the surface, the captured crew of X7, Place, Whittam, Etkin, and the others are marched across Tirpitz's deck under guard. Basil Place, cool as Highland ice, glances at his watch. He knows the timers are running. He knows Cameron is still out there. The Germans, jubilant at their victory, herd the prisoners below for interrogation, convinced the threat is over. Kapitän zur See Hans Meyer, Tirpitz's commander, even allows the crew to return to routine, though he keeps the ship at heightened alert. Inside X6, the air is poison. Carbon dioxide levels climb, heads swim. Lorimer ties a soaked handkerchief over his mouth. They've cleared the inner nets, but the outer boom still blocks the path to open water. Cameron makes the hardest call of his life. "We scuttle her here. Shallow water. We'll break surface and take our chances on foot." The crew nod without hesitation. These are Royal Navy volunteers who knew the odds when they signed on. Better to swim for the Norwegian shore and link up with resistance than die trapped in a steel coffin. At 07:55 a.m., Cameron blows all ballast. X6 lurches upward like a cork, breaching in a cascade of white water just inside the outer defenses. Machine gun fire opens instantly from the nearest destroyer. Bullets ricochet off the casing as the four men scramble out the hatch, diving into the bone-numbing fjord. The current is strong, the water near freezing. They swim for the rocky shore, strokes desperate, lungs burning. Behind them, X6 settles back, hatches open, flooding quickly. She'll be a total loss, but the charges are already on the bottom, fused and irrevocable. 0800 hours. Aboard Tirpitz, breakfast is being served. Off-duty watchkeepers joke about the toy submarine they captured. Then the world ends. 4 massive explosions detonate almost simultaneously beneath the battleship's keel. 6 tons of amytal in total, the combined force equivalent to a battleship broadside fired upward. The fjord erupts. Columns of black water and mud rocket 200 feet into the air, carrying steel fragments, deck planking, and entire gun turrets skyward. Tirpitz lifts bodily out of the water by several feet, her 42,900-ton bulk rising on the pressure wave before crashing back down with a thunderous groan that echoes off the surrounding mountains like the wrath of gods. Inside the ship, men are flung through the air. Bulkheads buckle, turbine foundations shear, the keel breaks in 3 places, all lights die, steam lines rupture, filling compartments with scalding fog. Over 100 sailors are killed instantly, hundreds more injured. Kapitän Zursee Hans Meyer, Tirpitz's commander, even allows the crew to return to routine, though he keeps the ship at heightened alert. Captain Meyer staggers onto the shattered bridge, staring in horror as his unsinkable ship lists heavily, flooded to the lower decks, turrets jammed, engines dead. The damage is catastrophic. Tirpitz is no longer capable of putting to sea. She will spend the rest of the war as a crippled hulk, eventually finished off by RAF Lancasters in 1944. But on this September morning, the Royal Navy's Midget submarines have already achieved what entire carrier fleets could not. On the rocky shore, soaked and freezing, Cameron, Lorimer, Kendall, and Goddard haul themselves into the scrub. Norwegian resistance fighters, alerted by the colossal blasts, are already moving to meet them. The men look back across the water at the smoke-shrouded giant, listing like a wounded animal. They cannot believe what they have just done. And neither, in that moment, can the Kriegsmarine.
The smoke clears slowly over Kåfjord, revealing a scene of utter devastation. Tirpitz sits low in the water, her once proud lines twisted and broken, steam hissing from ruptured vents like the dying breaths of a leviathan. Her mighty turrets, Anton, Bruno, Caesar, Dora, hang frozen at grotesque angles, barrels pointing uselessly at the sky. Fires flicker deep within her bowels, tended by damage control parties who work in stunned silence. Captain Meyer stands on the listing bridge, coat torn, face ashen. The Kriegsmarine's greatest surface threat, the ship that tied down entire British fleets just by existing, has been humbled not by battleships or carriers, but by 4-man crews in submarines the size of motor launches. Word races through the German chain of command like wildfire. Admiral Dönitz receives the report in Berlin and slams his fist on the desk. Hitler, when informed days later, flies into one of his rages, demanding courts-martials, executions, impossible explanations. How could the impossible have happened? The nets, the patrols, the hydrophones, none of it mattered against the sheer audacity of the Royal Navy's midget warriors. On the rocky Norwegian shoreline, hidden in a shepherd's hut high above the fjord, Lieutenant Donald Cameron and his 3 crewmen huddle around a tiny stove, thawing frozen limbs with cups of scalding tea provided by resistance fighters from the Middle network. Torstein Johansson, a local teacher turned saboteur, briefs them in hushed tones. German patrols are sweeping the area, roadblocks everywhere, dogs sniffing the trails. But the Norwegians know these mountains like their own blood. Over the next 8 days, Cameron's team is passed from safe house to safe house, fishermen's cabins, remote farms, even a hidden cave, fed reindeer stew and cloudberries, clothed in civilian woolens. Each night they listen to the distant rumble of salvage tugs trying to keep Tirpitz afloat. Meanwhile, the captured men from X7, Basil Place, Godfrey Whittam, Robert Aitken and the others are treated with a strange mix of hostility and respect aboard the battleship itself. Interrogated by Meyer's officers, they give nothing but name, rank and number. Place, ever composed, even manages a faint smile when told the charges have detonated. The Germans cannot believe the prisoners knew the exact timing, cannot grasp that these men willingly sacrificed themselves for a greater blow. By October 1st, Cameron, Lorimer, Kendall and Goddard reach the Swedish border after a grueling overland trek through snow-dusted passes. Neutral Sweden means internment, but also safety. They are repatriated to Britain weeks later, stepping off a Mosquito aircraft at Lukas to a hero's welcome kept deliberately quiet, Churchill's orders to preserve the secrecy of the X-Craft program for future operations. The honors come swiftly. Lieutenant Donald Cameron and Lieutenant Basil Place are awarded the Victoria Cross, the highest gallantry decoration in the British Empire, for valour in the presence of the enemy. Diver able seaman William Savage from X7, who lost his life in the nets, and engine room artificer Edmund Goddard receive posthumous and living recognition accordingly. In total, 9 decorations are bestowed, including Distinguished Service Orders and conspicuous gallantry medals. But the true victory is strategic. Tirpitz never sails again as a fighting ship. Forced into dry dock for months of futile repairs, she is eventually moved south to Tromsø as a floating battery, only to be finished off by RAF tallboy bombs in November 1944. The Arctic convoys to Russia flow freer. The home fleet releases capital ships for the Pacific. An entire theater of naval warfare shifts because a handful of men in tiny submarines refuse to believe the beast was untouchable. In the years that follow, veterans of Operation Source gather quietly, trading stories over pints. Cameron, ever modest, always returns to the same thought. They couldn't believe the stealth of those little boats, not in training, not in the fjord, not even when the charges went off and the world shook. Yet they did it anyway. And in that disbelief turned to triumph, a legend was born. One that still echoes through the cold Norwegian waters whenever men speak of courage against impossible odds. End.